Hi, friend. Thanks so much for joining me for this week's episode of the Hopecast. I wanted to give you a content warning that today's episode may contain themes around sexual abuse and trafficking. If that's especially triggering and you'd like to skip this and join us next week, we totally understand. Or if you have young listeners around, you may want to push pause and come back when you have headphones or you're by yourself.
Hello and welcome to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Rachael is a speaker, inspirational author, and an overcomer. As Rachael is walking through her own journey of grief, she's challenging others to persevere and overcome their own circumstances. Find out more at rachaelflick.com. Here now is your host, Rachael Flick.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Today, I have the honor of bringing you Andi Burger. Andi has an incredible story about human trafficking today she's going to bring you. She is a survivor, author, advocate, and the founder of Voices Against Trafficking. The mission of Voices Against Trafficking is to be a voice for the voiceless, the men, women, and children who are victims of trafficking and sexual exploitation. Andi lives with her husband and child in Oregon. Welcome, Andi. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Rachael. It's an honor to be on your show today.
Yes, I'm so glad to have you. You have an incredible testimony, and I'm looking forward to the listeners getting to hear your heart and see what an amazing story of resilience and transformation that you have.
Well, thank you. It is definitely a God story.
Okay, well, let's jump into it. Tell us kind of some of where you started.
Absolutely. So long before there was a term called human trafficking, when people were barely talking about child abuse in the early 60s and 70s, I was actually trafficked by immediate and some extended family members from the ages of 6 months to 17 years old. And the abuse and the all the things that go with being locked up or tortured or passed around or just, physically accosted every day, beaten and things like that, was so bad that by the time I was 5, I decided I would take my own life because my birth mother made it clear that she could take my life anytime she chose. And so I went to the curb in my house and I waited for a car to be coming by fast enough because I knew that if I was dead, then no one could touch me, no one could hurt me, no one could, abuse me the way that I was being abused. But as I waited for that car, which never came that day, I looked up into the sky, Rachael, and it was so blue. It was so huge. And I was just a little kid and I'm wondering, how big is it? How far does that sky go? And who is there someone who made it, bigger than the people hurting me? And so as I pondered that, I heard in my heart this.
That's a big thought for 5.
It's a big thought for 5. Yeah, I don't even know. It was such a God thing because I heard his voice in my heart saying, this is not the plan I have for you. And suicide answer. And I would never have even known the word suicide at that age. No one would ever talk about that. So it had to be, that presence that reached my heart that day. And I went back up the very long driveway to the garage and I stood against it. And I remember clear as day saying, if you keep me alive, I will do whatever you call me to do. Imagine a 5-year-old not really understanding who God is, can't see him, but trusting that voice in her heart that says there's a plan for you somehow. And things were not good. For those who have suffered, that abuse is a continuum of pain. So I suffered a lot through those years. And the last time my birth mother tried to take my life, I was 17 years old.
Wow.
So it was a long childhood, which really wasn't a childhood, but, a lot of suffering, a lot of torture, a lot of pain. And, how is it my birth mother on occasion would drag us to church? How is it that people are supposed to protect you and love you don't? So for a little kid, I'm the problem. I'm the mess, right? Everyone keeps telling me if I wasn't there, their life would be better. And so all I grew up with was fear. And I had a tremendous speech impediment as a kid, actually up through college. So when I wasn't being controlled and managed by predators, I had people laughing at me on the outside. So there really wasn't any support.
Wow, that's just crushing, and it sounds like torment. Did anyone ever notice in your life, teachers, adults that were outside of your family, did anyone ever get suspicious about what your life looked like behind closed doors?
Well, we had a pretty good fake image in our family going because my birth mother was a teacher and my birth
Mm,
father was a salesperson. So we kind of looked like everything was good. But to your point, many decades later, I had the opportunity. I ran into a few people who knew us way back when briefly, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, we kind of thought something was wrong. We weren't really sure. We didn't want to embarrass your parents, or we didn't want to cause any trouble for you. So we didn't say anything."
wow.
And again, that was a different culture, but
Yeah.
the point is still valid today. A lot of people won't speak up because they're fearful of something.
Yeah, that's true. So let's say, I'm a mandated reporter, but what if there's someone who's concerned about their neighbor or, someone at their daycare or in their school? What might be some signs that a child might show you that intervention is needed, even if it's just a check the welfare from a Department of Human Services type of caregiver?
Sure, absolutely. Well, aside from the physical things that you could see, whether it's
Hmm.
bruises or repetitive broken bones or whatever. So if you go to those predators that are very careful about how they hurt their children,
Mm,
then you want to look for eye contact. I rarely gave anybody eye contact because I didn't want anyone to ask questions. I didn't
mm,
want people to ask me anything I knew I couldn't answer, about my family situation. So I would have to lie a lot if they asked, "Well, how are your parents?" "Oh, you must have the best parents ever." And I would literally have to lie because I
wow.
could never say anything. And that was just a horrible situation to be in anyway. But for kids, yes. Is there a kid that spends more time at your home than their own home?
Mm,
Is there a child that looks disheveled, like maybe their clothes have just been thrown on or they're not being cared for, that kind of thing? Are there other signs of communication issues, with them speaking to you? Maybe they're not as alert in school because they haven't been fed well or
mm,
they've been, eaten during the night, which is a brutal thing to say, but still, do they look like they've been fed? Do they look like they're afraid of other people? Are they a loner? Are they kind of just standing off to the side or not talking to anyone because they don't want anyone to know their shame?
mm,
And I didn't know how other people lived because it started so early. Once I went through counseling and they figured out how early this started, and there were some other confirmations, but the kids we rescued, they do remember the day it changed or
wow.
it started. So there are differences in what you think is normal and what other people think is normal.
Hmm. Yeah, if you grow up in it as a child, you don't question it. And it's really common for you to think as a child that you play some role in this or you're at fault because it's innate in a child to feel connected to their caregiver and to try to survive through that connection, right? So if they can fix it, if there's something wrong with them, then they can fix it. And so that's where that twisted thinking comes in. And then the enemy comes and he uses that and manipulates them into silence and shame. And that's what keeps a lot of people stuck for a really long time, is that shame that you were talking about.
Absolutely. And it was not a problem for my birth mother or my birth father to tell people, well, she was in an accident, we couldn't return,
Mm,
and laugh about it publicly. So they were big into public humiliation. That was part of the control factor, putting your kids down in front of other people, whether people think it's funny or not, it's abusive. Emotionally and mentally to that child. So there were a lot of things. There are people that have depraved nature. There are people that are evil, and some of them even go to church.
which is so incredibly confusing for a child. Is God in this? Is he protecting me? Why is he allowing this to happen?
One of the things that I call a saving grace was I was about 3 years old. And the first memory I have of my birth mother, maybe a little bit earlier than that, was being chased through the house with a butcher knife because my brother and I happened to put our hands on the wallpaper at the entrance to the kitchen. And we wanted to see what was for dinner. We were kids, we were curious.
Mm,
And she turned around with that butcher knife and stomped and yelled and screamed and chased us through the house. And for whatever reason at that moment, I understood at 3, again, God, that people can do good, they can do evil, or they can do nothing.
hmm.
And so that God had given man free will, and it wasn't him hurting me or trying to hurt me. It was their choice to do that.
Wow.
So that was an astounding act of grace,
Mm,
because I always knew that each person chooses good, evil, or to simply not do anything, which to me is as culpable as doing the act.
this is really hard for me, for my mom heart to reconcile, that children need to be cared for and they need to be protected. Do you have any intuition that maybe your mom was mentally ill or just depraved? Like, do you have any insight now into that as an adult?
Well, even through therapy, the therapist would say she was this or that, maybe, multiple personalities or maybe psychopathic. We don't know. But at the end of the day, the people that tried to excuse her behavior,
Yeah, not excusing it.
there is no excuse. No matter what your mental
Mm-mm.
state is, get help. There are more opportunities to get confidential help now than ever, in our history. And so if you're tilting on the edge of anger or maybe hurting your children, there are ways to get help in a positive environment or a positive helpline that can avoid situations that will forever ruin, the trust between a mom and a child or a father and a child. But again, that was a different time. It just is very, very difficult. You're right. It's either depraved behavior, there could be mental illness, or they simply have that nature to hurt.
Mm,
She would have been called a ritualistic abuser. So,
wow.
like an addict,
Mhm.
she got off on causing that pain and planning it and devising it. And, when you hear a sibling being, you know, attacked in another room, that's as traumatizing
Yes.
as you being the one.
Yeah. Well, and PTSD develops when we feel like we ourself or someone else we love is going to die and we're powerless to stop it. And that's the ingredients right there.
Yep. You don't have to actually be the direct victim. You could watch a horror film as a child and be traumatized. You could watch an accident. You could have so many divorce, so many illness, a lot of things that can traumatize. How many kids have had bad experiences in hospitals, right? And they're
Yeah.
forever afraid of going to a hospital. And that's a smaller scale, but it's still the same trauma
Mhm.
that causes a lifelong issue. I'm 6 decades into life and I'm still dealing with PTSD, but God's grace is immense. And so,
Mm,
I kind of do self checks or get a little maintenance therapy when I feel a little bit either overwhelmed or something that God is trying to heal in my life is now safe to come out and I need to deal with it.
that's so wise that you're still willing to do that. I think a lot of people, especially who have extensive trauma backgrounds, can feel like, oh my gosh, I've just done so much work already. Like, is it ever going to be done? I dealt with this already. But trauma has layers or facets, and that we continue to go deeper and polish them. And as long as we're willing to surrender our hearts to the Lord and that trauma to Him, He has more to offer us in healing and wholeness.
Absolutely. And if we hold on to the bitterness and the anger, imagine clenching your fists like, I'm just going to hold on to this, and I'm just going to let it ruin my life, basically. But if we
Mhm.
open our fist and release it to God and let Him deal with whatever is going to happen to those people that have hurt us, then we don't have that burden of having to think about it,
Right.
because I'm sure God's judgment is way better than anything we could come up with. But also, when your hands are open, they can receive
Mhm.
healing and blessing and other things. So I tell people for your own health, forgive. It doesn't mean you ignore the pain of what happened. You're just releasing them out of your life. And then you deal with the pain. And then once you deal with the pain, you have a wholeness in that particular area. And you may have to go incident by incident, but eventually you're just going to have a great new normal in your life.
Yeah. I like to remind people that you reap what you sow. And a lot of times we talk about that in a negative context. Like if you do bad things, you get bad karma. But the same is true in reverse, that if you sow or invest in healing over and over and over in your life, you're going to get wholeness. And so when you're in the dark, when you're going through the valley of the shadow of death, through your pain and through your transformation process, it can feel like it's never going to be light again. But you are a walking, living testimony of this. And I have this in my own story from my husband's death, that it does transform, it does change, it does move forward and release and ease and bring more joy into your life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as it said, there sorrow may be in the night, but joy does come in the morning. Sometimes it's not the next morning, or a month down the road,
Right.
But a year or 2 or 5 or 10, I don't know for each person, but it does come because that is a promise from God. So it has to be true, and it has to happen. And some people, like you said, they give up in that 11th hour before the joy comes or before the healing manifests in their life.
I feel like there's a tremendous amount of pressure in the healing process right before breakthrough. I feel like I get most antsy and overwhelmed and helpless right before that sun is about to rise in a certain issue in my life. So you said the last time that your biological mother abused you was at 17. What happened at 17?
There was a situation I could kind of feel it brewing in the car. I was not allowed to go anywhere as a 17-year-old or really even to movies with people that wasn't controlled. I barely was allowed to date. So getting out and away from them because I was still in their house as a minor. Even when I tried to reach out for help, they'd be like, well, you have to bring your parents, which doesn't help someone who's being abused by them or controlled by them. So what happened was there was a situation, I'm not sure how it started, but basically my birth mother went off on me in the car, and so made my birth father turn the car around. We didn't go to the dinner we were supposed to go to that I really didn't want to go to anyway because I was studying for finals, but I didn't have a choice. We get back to the house, and she was very good at taking things away that were important to you. So I knew she would want the car keys. So I gave her the car keys that I used for the car to get to school before she asked for them. So she went off, lunged at me, grabbed me by the throat, and started choking me to death. And the only thing that my birth father did that was decent was somehow in that moment, he managed to grab her and pull her off of me. Now, he was like over 6 feet tall, bigger than her. She was like 5, 2. And yet it took him a good 2-3 minutes to pull her off of me. And that's just before I thought for sure I was going to die, that my neck was going to snap because I couldn't keep her pressure of her hands, very big, meaty hands, and was so intense that I just figured I was going home. And I ran out of the house and I thought I'm just going to run wherever I can go. But 11 o'clock at night, in a not great area of town, there wasn't a place to run to in the middle of the night. And I had no money. I had no way to get anywhere. And it was at least half a mile or a mile to the highway and at least 2 miles to the police department. But at 17, again, I would have been a minor and they would have sent me back. So now I'm adding to my shame, feeling like I can't even run away successfully. I'm a loser. I'm a failure. I should be dead. And then God would correct that. And I went back to that house. And when I finally got to go to college, that was the first time I started looking at how other people lived or were raised. So I was kind of like, wow, this is pretty scary. But, God just took care of me until I figured out how to live on my own.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. And unlike a lot of kids who experience extensive habitual abuse and trauma, you did really well in school and even went on to become an attorney.
I did. Education was kind of I tell people there were two other salvations, education and music, because I loved music and that filled in the lonely times, the lonely hours. Barry Manilow, Neil Diamond, way before your age, but things that had stories, and I felt like they're talking to And then
Yeah, they knew you.
yeah, they knew you. They felt my heartache and pain. Uh, and then I went to college and I realized I could do really, really well after all the years of being told I was stupid, retarded, all those things that I was told from the time I can remember, that I could do really well. Certain teachers, certain instructors and professors. So I hauled cookies and I finished in 3 years.
Wow. Your bachelor's or your AD?
My bachelor's. So I went summer, I went Christmas, I went 2 semesters.
You're like, I'm not going
I,
home. I'm fine. I'll stay
I'm
here.
not going. I'm going to. I still had to have contact with them, but at least it was at a distance a little bit. And so I thought, I'm just getting the heck out of Haytown. By graduating early, figured out how to do it, and got done, and then decided, I'll go right into the workforce. And now at that time, of course, the birth parents are trying to buddy up and be nice, and I just thought, yeah, no, that's not going to work. I don't have to be with them. I had a lot of people at church say, well, you need to honor your mother and your father and
Mhm.
do all this stuff. And it was such a conflict, Rachel. It was just always that, you know, what I would call the more legalistic, you have to do it this way, church, and
Right.
not so much what the real relationship was. So then I did decide I'm going to try law school. If I could go for a year and learn how to do contracts and the writing part of it, which I love to write and I love to speak, then I would be better suited for the workplace. And then it just so happened I passed the first year, not by a lot, but I passed the first year, and I'm not a quitter. So I went all the way through, knowing I wouldn't be an active attorney, but that I wanted to use it to help in some way down the road. I just didn't know how. And my writing professor said, Andi, you are so creative. You're like way out there. But law school, I wish I had gone because it will help you think and write differently. And
Mm.
it did.
Mhm.
It made me much more effective as a writer, a speaker, an advocate, even back then for
Wow.
kids that needed help. And so that's what happened. And I threw myself into work being the best employee, the best everything so that people would leave me alone. The further I got from anyone, the safer I was. That's how I lived for a while.
Makes sense. People are not safe. People are scary. You are still carrying shame with your identity. It's not healed.
Yeah. I built a great facade. I had a great game face for a long, long time, a couple of decades.
So what happened after your game face failed you?
After the game face failed during the middle of a very abusive marriage, I had waited. I married somebody from the church, and he turned out to be basically what we know now as kind of sexual deviant. And so here I am. I have nobody to talk to about these things going on. I didn't know what to do as a good Christian woman, and very naive. I was mentally ahead, but naive, very naive in a lot of things. So
Mm.
the fast track was God delivered me from that. And I tell people deliverance doesn't always come in the package you expect, but it's still deliverance, even if it's divorce or even if it's something that you wouldn't normally choose.
Mm.
And that's where I really began to experience God as provider, counselor, friend, things that I had heard about mentally, but I didn't really experientially feel that. I knew God, I just didn't experience him. And
Mm.
in those couple of years after the divorce, he really came into my heart and awakened all of that. And I realized that he had my heart the whole time. He's the one that kept me from my 3 attempts at suicide. He's
Wow.
the one that pulled me back and said, this is not going to happen. You're mine.
Mm.
You're mine. I love you. And that came through an experience in a little chapel where the speaker, after she was done, came and sat next to me and without saying a word, put her arms around me because I was crying through the whole service. It was the beginning of God's uh, tangible healing in my life, where he said, I've heard your cries. I'm going to heal you. It's complicated. It's going to be in layers, but I'm here. And she put her arms around me and started rocking me like a real mom would rock a child, like
Mm.
comforting. And I had never felt that. And I was 30 at the time when that happened.
Mm.
So her touch, she didn't even know what was going on. She just held me and rocked me side to side. And God was embracing me that day. And I
Yes, he
realized
was.
I needed to feel him. And that's where the exciting part of the journey began was experiencing, counselor talking to him in a different way other than desperation and please don't let them kill me today, or I got myself in trouble and I don't know what to do kind of thing. But provider, he provided for my needs. He released me from an abusive marriage, and then 2 years later brought the most amazing human I've ever known into my life, and we've been married 22 years now. He showed me I could be successful in a relationship, that I wasn't broken, not the way I thought, and that his mercy and his grace and his love for each of his children. I mean, I was like yesterday's garbage, and he took the time to love me back,
Wow.
to love me back into wholeness, and to help others, try to get whole as well, lead them to wholeness.
Yeah, so I'm not surprised, just hearing the incredible perseverance that's in you and your mind to be an advocate and to train yourself to be an advocate and then to transform through your trauma. And that gave you a heart for people in trafficking. Tell us about that.
Yes. Again, the term human trafficking just kind of came up in the last 20, 30 years, but more so in the last 10 years in the national headlines and stories we hear. But I think what people don't understand is that, first of all, anyone who is coerced into labor or into sexual activities against their will, be it a child, a young adult, a college student, for profit, that is the basic definition of commercial trafficking. What I was in was familial trafficking, and familial trafficking is reporting a little harder because the family members are covered by bloodline. They can just say, oh, well, it was a misunderstanding. Oh, well, things got out of control. It'll never happen again, right? So it makes it harder even today, especially whether it's a judge or law enforcement who work really hard to help. Sometimes it's hard to see that line because predators are very, very skilled at lying and at deception. So, but back to point is that every 40 seconds in America right now, Rachel, a child 18 years or under is abducted. That means they're taken or lured into something they think is safe. So, for example, if you have a teen,
By a non-family member?
yeah, most likely by a non-family member, they may say, oh, hey, mom, I want to go mow these lawns. There's a job. Or I want to go I'm going to go be a model for this photography professor or whatever it is, that lures a teenager into what looks like a safe situation. And then it is not. When young people begin to socialize, who are they hanging out with? Even if it's a good friend, what about that good friend's brother or sister? Are they safe? We need to do a little more due diligence in finding out who our kids are hanging out with. But
I guess I think about runaways being really vulnerable, but what
Mhm.
you're saying is like the kids aren't running away, not all of them, and that they are just thinking they're taking a legitimate job, and then they're being conscripted or abducted into labor or sexual trafficking.
Or they're going to somebody's home, and once they're there and they get trapped or they're groomed to see what they're doing at this house normal, then they are afraid to say what's going on, or the groomer or the predator is going to make sure that they don't tell anyone, that they go home with a story that matches what they would expect to tell their parents or whatever it is. But again, the part too, like you just said, not every teenager that runs away is a rebellious teenager. Yes, are there rebellious teenagers? Of course there are. The kids we worked with, over 300 of them, they ran to the streets because it was safer than what they were running from in their mind.
Yeah.
They figured they'd hook up with somebody and get a job or figure out how to manage or couch surf. And then couch surfing runs thin after a while, especially if you have no money to pay, especially if, the person you're couch surfing with is also unsafe. So they find out very quickly the street is not their friend.
Mm.
And now they're stuck. They can't go back. They can't move forward. So they will do whatever they have to get fed, to get a bed, to have somebody, take care of them for a night.
Okay.
They're very vulnerable that way. And just like
Very vulnerable.
shy kids, kids that don't feel their self-worth at school. It used to be if you wore glasses or had braces, you were the nerd or you were the outcast, you weren't the popular kid. But it goes beyond that now because the predators know how to groom other kids to recruit.
Other kids to recruit. Tell me about that.
Okay, so for example, college kids. A couple years back, an ex-Navy SEAL friend of mine who still works in anti-trafficking measures said, they will pay a young man, for example, upwards of $2,000 for one night to go and target a girl at that time, or maybe two girls, but usually one girl. Chat her up, make her feel special, find someone that looks like they'd be easy to get their confidence or their trust, take them out for a Coke or a hamburger. And then suddenly, oh, hey, I've got to go pick up something at my friend's house. You don't mind coming with me, right? Or, gosh, I really like you after they've had their first little, encounter. And I'd like to take you to a party, Saturday night. What do you think about that? Oh, yeah, because, who doesn't want to go to a party when you're a young person? And especially if you're a girl that maybe other guys weren't looking at in particular. So you go and then,
vulnerable to that attention.
absolutely. I want to have a boyfriend. I want to be liked. I want to be loved. I want to be popular, whatever it is that is driving that vulnerability or that insecurity. So then you end up at this party and other people leave, but all the guys stay. And suddenly now you're in a situation where you can't call for help. You can't leave. And the average victim, Rachel, will be sold 20 to 25 times in a night, depending on
Wow.
the type of trafficking ring it is. But so somebody got paid to target, somebody's getting paid to use her, and she's not going to be able to go home the next day and tell anyone what happened, nor would she, even if she could. If she manages to get out of it, she would be very lucky. 1 in 100 trafficking victims is about the average that we know based on reporting, which is very hard these days to get good reporting, will survive. So again, they're grooming kids to recruit for cash, for money.
That is powerful information and painful information. That is hard for my heart to hear that. I have such a protective heart that I just want to, put out my dragon mama and, engulf all of these traffickers. And I know that that's the heart of the Lord, right? The heart of the Lord is to protect them
It is.
and to rescue them. That's crazy that 1 in 100 will survive.
Yeah, if they have a chance to escape. And we've seen in the news that even when a victim does manage to kill the predator, which is very rare, she's the one that went to jail, and it took years to get her out of jail because it was considered murder and there wasn't a witness. So it's so hard. And think about the Olympian, Simone Biles. She made a report 2015 to the FBI. She reported. And then up until about last year, they were trying to turn the tables on her. Again, what has happened is we have forgotten that the Lord wants all the children to come to him. Okay, that they have value to the Lord, that they have value to our country because they're the future. And if we break the future before it has a chance to even manifest, then it is on us. We are the ones that are creating that situation where our children don't feel safe to talk to us about things that are disturbing because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to be judged. So one of the things I do try to encourage everyone is, look, if you are in charge of a child, a guardian, a parent, a grandparent, school, anything, it is your duty to create a safe field of trust so that any child can come to you and say, I didn't like the way, the janitor looked at me, or I didn't like the way that, Joey or Jane, touches me, in the bathroom or whatever it is. They have to be able to be safe enough to say, this bothers me, or I feel uncomfortable, or this person hurt me, without us getting overreactive, flying off the handle, or getting mad at the child. Because of course, it's also our duty to vet out the information. But first and foremost, if the kids don't feel safe, they will never tell us, who's hurting them and how we can help.
And that we won't be mad. We won't be
That's
mad
right.
at them if they say
Exactly.
something. A lot of kids get blamed for the abuse that they report.
Exactly, and it is not their fault. When it's between an adult and a child, that adult has full responsibility for the protection and care of that child. There were videos way back, I don't know, a year or two ago, of a woman beating her child in the car that got on tape. And why is that entertainment?
Hmm.
So we have to change our perspectives back to how valuable each human life is. And so, Voices Against Trafficking, that's one of the things that God nudged me in the middle of the night. He's like, Andi, you've got one voice, and it's a good voice. It's a great voice, but I want more, you need more voices. And so I went on this quest to invite anyone who wanted to be part of the solution to join Voices Against Trafficking, with heart, spirit, put your name on our roster of 1 million names, so that, in a couple of years, we have these names where we can go to any legislator, any school board, any wherever, and say, we have 1 million names of people that want you to protect our kids.
That's good.
People who want you to put the predators in jail and keep them there for life or however long it takes. But there should be no parole, no early release for any sexual predator. And because of all the things that go on, we should never allow anyone who is pro pedophile or pro abuse or pro easy sentences or no sentences for people that abuse and hurt children to ever have a position of influence, whether it is the city council or being mayor or being governor or any position of influence. It
Yes.
just should never happen. But that's on us to say,
Mm-hmm.
we're either going to vote this way, or we're not going to financially support, or we're going to get a town hall together and keep this from happening, or we're going to recall Jane Doe or John Doe.
Mm-hmm.
They are not protecting. In my own area, the district attorney publicly many times has said, I don't believe we don't have human trafficking here because I don't prosecute it. And I know our law enforcement here, they work very hard. They had some great cases, but again, they weren't prosecuted the way they should have been.
Andi, this is powerful. This is so good. I love it. I love just your heart and your energy, and it is such a beautiful picture of transformation. Of you were not protected as a little girl, and now you can be the protector for those little girls and little boys and men and women who are in these situations. And you are truly allowing the Lord to bring beauty from your ashes and to change the generations, to get in there and to see stories and lives and hearts moved, and to do the advocacy. I love that, becoming an attorney, you're an advocate, and that's a really important piece of what we need. So, Voices Against Trafficking, how can people learn more about you and come alongside of you?
Absolutely. So voicesagainsttrafficking.com, that's the website. On the website, you'll find helplines and hotlines for all things suicide prevention, child abuse alert, whatever. So voicesagainsttrafficking.com, we're a nonprofit. We do a lot of public awareness campaigns. So we appreciate any support. We also have a book out, Voices Against Trafficking, The Strength of Many Voices Speaking as One. That helps us keep our programs going. We're involved in rescues across the country. We reach out internationally for the top speakers so that we can bring those and educate all of us about what's working, what isn't working, how we can do better. So the website, again, voicesagainsttrafficking.com. You can go there, add your voice, see what we're about. And of course, you can contact me through the contact page on there.
That's awesome. And is there a link for them to give there as well?
Yes, we're on Facebook and YouTube as well. So there is a link for them to directly go to me, and also to purchase a book, and also to find the hotline. So they'll find everything on that website.
Awesome. Awesome. I love your ministry. I love what you're doing. And I love that you are bringing voices to counteract people who don't want to admit or see the trafficking that is happening around us, and that you are sometimes a voice in the wilderness, but that you are gathering many together so that many can be saved. Everybody, this has been Andi Burger on the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you would rate, review, and subscribe to continue to spread the message of hope, you will share this with so many people and see lives changed. Everybody have a great week, and I'll connect with you again soon.
You've been listening to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. To find out more, go to rachaelflick.com. While you're there, you can book Rachael for your next speaking engagement. Her inspiring message will be sure to engage and touch the heart of your audience at your next conference, church event, or business function. Go to rachelflick.com to book her today. While you're online, you can discover more information about all of the platforms that this podcast is on. Also, be sure to click on the social media icons at the top of the page, and you will be directed to Rachael's social media sites. If you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate if you would subscribe and leave us a review. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time for another edition of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.